I am part of my past. I am my past person, and my past person is me. And so today, I honor him. And as I travel my journey of authenticity today, there's no part of that person that is dead to me. We came together and we are going to be together.
What do you really know about people who are born transgender? Have you ever met someone who's transgender? Well, if you're like me, you're curious but hesitant to ask questions. Well, welcome to Demystifying the Transgender Journey. In our conversations with people who were born transgender, their families, friends, and the professionals who support them, we ask probing questions and discover insightful and educational answers. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. Now let's get right into today's episode. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. I'm your host, Lynn Murphy, and co-host is Wendy Cole. I'm the author of 50 Life Lessons from Inspiring Women and the founder of Women Who Push the Limits. And Wendy is a fabulous transition mentor and change coach. Thank you all for joining us today and being part of this community. We've got unique experiences, unique perspectives, and very authentic journeys of the people that we're interviewing. Today, you are in for such a treat. We are going to interview the amazing Marzzi, who redefines resilience, creativity, and empowerment. Wendy and I are welcoming Marzzi, a woman whose vibrant spirit and extraordinary life story promises to inspire and to captivate you. She isn't just fabulous and gorgeous, which she is very much. She's a trailblazer, thriving in the high voltage world of power delivery at an electric utility, where she brings her authentic self to a department that's pretty much full of testosterone. She has a unique perspective there and is adding so much to that environment. And when she's off the clock, she finds her joy and her fun in scaling hiking trails with friends, staying fit, channeling her artistry and her fabulous works, which I got the tour before we talked, and she's got some amazing artwork that she's done. She's graced the lens of a fabulous photographer. She's just an amazing person. But what truly sets Marzzi apart is her unwavering dedication to helping others discover their truest selves. Through her work in addiction recovery and self-discovery, she lights the way for those who seek empowerment, often reminding her friends, and this is her quote, "There's nothing more empowering than empowerment." So we're very honored today that Marzzi will share her unique perspective, her hard-won struggles, her inspiration, understanding, and you are in for a great story today. She's here. Are you ready to be empowered? Marzzi, thank you for joining us today on Demystifying the Transgender Journey.
Thank you both for having me here today. Hi, everybody. My name is Marzzi Starzzi, and I'm happy to share my journey of transition here with you. Hello, Wendy. Glad to be here. Thank you.
And for our audience, just briefly, before we get into your story, or as you get into your story, Marzzi transitioned in her 50s. And so we've got that perspective of what was her life like before she transitioned and after she transitioned. And so let me ask you just a few questions and start this conversation. Marzzi, what was your life like before you transitioned?
I lived a very sort of normal life. I'm going to kind of pick up at about 2005, 2006 in that area. I'm a person that is a recovering alcoholic. So from that time, once I became sober, I knew that there was something about me that I had to change. It had always been there, but I always stuffed it away. And as I furthered my recovery journey, I knew that I had to address this at some point in time. And when I got sober in 2006, over the course of the next years, I was like, this is not going to go away. So although I work in a very highly masculine environment and did all the things, I've been a motorcyclist and rock climber and all these things that people do that oftentimes are associated with male and testosterone kind of activities, I always knew that I had Marzzi inside of me. And so in 2013, I began my journey of transition in a very subtle way, and mostly by trying to find things on the internet and find other people that I could talk to that were similar to myself.
So what was it like going through puberty? Did that even affect you as a boy? Did you know you were different then? Was there something way back in that era?
I knew that I was different, probably 5-ish years old. I grew up in a cold environment. And one thing I always remember, young girls, they always had those round things that they stuck their hands in that were like part of their coat. Hand warmer, I guess is what it was called. I always thought that was cool. And I always really was drawn to the prettiness or the difference of kind of clothing little girls wore compared to what I was wearing. And I'm an only child, so I grew up in a home with just three people, mom, dad, and me. Outside sources, as far as family, everybody lived a long ways away. So I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with other people, male or female, as a young person, other than at school. But I knew I was different. Fast forwarding into puberty, this is where the other kids in school, obviously, you're starting to see changes in females and somewhat in guys too, but not as obvious. But yes, I did know then. I always questioned, did everybody have these feelings or was it just me? And as we went into junior high kind of area, obviously hormones start flowing and attraction happened. So, I was attracted to women, but I always had this itch in the back of my mind, like, I wonder what it'd be like to be wearing that dress. Or I wonder what it's like when girls start wearing makeup. And because the transition from seventh to eighth grade or eighth to ninth grade over the summers, a lot of times when these happen, you come back and it's a very dramatic difference than what you remember them like just 3 months ago. And I know that my transition from seventh to eighth grade, I was the same old person they saw when we said goodbye at the end of the school year. So I always found that very appealing and wondered, oh my gosh, I wonder what that's like. I dated girls, of course, as we went through those early years of puberty and high school. It's always kind of out of silliness. And this is a common theme sometimes where a girlfriend would be like, oh, I want to put mascara on you, or I want to put this lipstick on you, or whatever. And I was just more than happy to have them do that. And, or even like, try to plant the seed so that they would ask me that.
There you
Those were the things that I did in that time. So that would answer that kind of time frame of puberty and young adulthood. As I grew older, I dated women all the way up until as much as 10 years ago. The people I dated with, they often ask me, "Do you think you're gay?" And this would go back to high school, are you sure you're not gay? I'm like, no, I'm not gay. Why were you asking me that? So all along, even from that ninth grade was junior high for me. So that ninth grade where you start having little girlfriends, boyfriends, all the way through 2010, 2012, the people in my life, they sensed something was different about me. But of course, they didn't
go.
have the language for it either.
So you knew you weren't gay, but you knew that you were different. So maybe what they were seeing was that feminine side that was coming out that has always been there.
Absolutely. I do believe that was the case.
Well, and we know that being born transgender is not a choice. That's who you
Correct.
are. You're presenting however you decide to present, but you present as a male. But what's a choice is deciding to transition, deciding to live your authentic life. So what was it that propelled you at, I think you said when you were 50 that you decided that you were going to transition. What was it at that point after 5 decades of saying, I know there's something different, that's not me, but what was it that helped you make that decision? Whether it pushed you forward or whether you evolved slowly into that? What was the choice to live your authentic life and to come out as being the woman that you really are?
That's a great question. And we can go back to when I was about 42, 40, 43-ish. And through my addiction recovery, a big part of addiction recovery is to thine own self be true. So self-honesty. And I knew that I had to work really hard for me to be happy. I had to be honest to myself. So really how it started was I knew that this had to come out somehow. I didn't know at the time how it would. And I was actually dating a woman at the time and I kind of shared with her a little bit. And, she was very, very puzzled and sort of concerned at the time about my desires. And so I kind of came out as, I think I'm gender fluid. And there was a part of me that was really confused because in the world that I was in then, it was very heterosexual. So I was like, I mean, even if I were a female, I'm not going to date guys. And I was like, are lesbians going to date a transgender male to female person that may appear to be feminine, but has a penis. So I really struggled with that because in my mind, there was heterosexual or gay. And I didn't really understand that there was a lot of variance in that realm. Also, I really struggled with the idea that gender identity and sexual orientation were two separate entities.
Right.
And so for me, when I started really searching, it was the internet, it was things like Netflix. At one point, there was a little bit later on, 2016, 18-ish, there was Orange is the New Black with Laverne Cox. There was the show Transparent that came out, and 2018 Pose came out. So there's a lot of media that was coming out at the time. But earlier, prior to that, I really just felt like I was going to become somebody who was gender fluid. And I felt that there's these spaces where I could dress as she, her, and have this experience and then put all that stuff away and then be my previous self, he, him. The thing that I found, though, was the more that I expressed and let my she, her come out, the more that she craved to be out of the box.
That's what I was going to ask you. How did it feel when you started taking everything off to put it away? What was their feeling that you had?
In the early days, when I had so much fear associated with it, so there was a group at the time that I would connect with, a social group here in the area called Arizona Transgender. And so we're talking 2015-ish. We would have dinner outings and such. And, I would get dressed and go and have this 4 or 5 hour period of time on a Saturday night that I could be authentic. And then I would come home. And that whole time, I was sort of very anxiety and a lot of fear associated with it, like stopping at a red light or seeing a police car or whatever. Like is somebody going to find out what's going down with me? And then at the same time, to answer your question, Wendy, is when I went home and I changed, it was the reality that I had to go back to the other representation. It was kind of like a hype in the beginning and kind of get this almost a euphoria, and then you come down off of it. That carried on. So at some point where I transitioned out of this being a weekend thing, what ended up happening would I would go to work and I would be the he, him that I was, and I would come home and I would transition into Marzzi. That was a way of me being able to sort of escape the reality of who I really was. How that changed was I socially became more and more socially known as she, her, and Marzzi Starzzi. And yet, for a great period of time, I was my he, himself at work and with family. Now, how did that kind of work was at one point, the way I saw it was I'd go to work and I would come home and act as I was my she, herself. What eventually happened was I said to myself, they're paying me to go to work every day. I'm going to get paid to be the actor. And so the way I was able to do it for a long time, because I didn't know that full transition was going to be in my future, I really, at one point, I was concluded that this would not happen. Now, mind you, I was letting my hair grow. I was doing things such as getting my nails done, very subtly, of course. But I decided at that time, this is where I really transitioned fully mentally. The she, her had come out all the way. And when I was with family or at work, that's when the actor came out, being the he, him. I like to kid around and say that I'm a professional actor because I was paid to be acting at one point in time.
So there had to be a trigger point somewhere there where you just like, I can't do this anymore. This is too hard juggling the two lives.
Very good. I'm glad you asked that. If I back up a little bit to the 2014, 16 kind of time frame, the person I was dating at the time, she came into the relationship wanting to date a man. And the more I was expressing myself authentically, that was creating problems, clearly. We had intimacy issues. It was an unpleasant time for a relationship. Looking back, what I should have done is said to her, look, I've got a really big thing that I'm going to be going through, and I need to release you from this. But I was scared, and I wanted that person to be there to help me get through, which she didn't know how to get me through.
Right.
She's heterosexual. So what ended up happening for my 50th birthday, I went on a cruise. I flew down to Fort Lauderdale and I stayed on South Beach, Miami for 3 days. And I remember that day when I arrived, the shuttle bus dropped me off at my hotel and I went in, changed my clothes and my appearance. And I went out and walked the town of South Beach for the next 3 days authentically myself. I went to the day when it was time to board the ship, and I didn't go exactly like this, but very much like this. And I just showed them my documentation. They're like, welcome. And for 7 days on that ship, I was able to be fully me. I did have to wear a badge that had my previous name on it per their request. I mean, all you got to do is flip the badge over, right? I mean, they're usually facing the wrong way anyways, right?
Right.
So what happened was on the third day of the trip, I played 5 rounds of putt-putt golf by myself that day because I was cruising solo, right? And it was a wonderful time for me to be in this space of selfness. As a matter of fact, I remember this back in the day before we had wireless earbuds and all that. I always had earbuds in all the time. I listened to music the whole time. And that allowed me to have this kind of bubble of safety around me. The 5th round of putt-putt golf was done. I sat down on a chair. It was a sea day, so there was no land to be seen around the ship. And I said, this is how I'm going to live my life. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to come out at work or to my family, but I'm going to go home. I'm going to sell my house and move to a new neighborhood. And when I get out of that U-Haul truck, this is who they're going to see. So that was November of 18. November of 19, I moved into this home and I did exactly that. And that was the deciding factor at 50 years old that I would do it. From there, that was 2019. Due to some of my social appearances that I've done here in my community, as far as DJing and karaoke hosting, there are people that know me as my previous self. So there was some crossover there, but for the most part, I didn't have to explain a lot of why I was doing this. People just saw me as Marzzi.
You actually physically moved houses. You didn't change careers, but you made a physical change. It's so interesting to see how that kind of had a dividing line there for you, it sounds like.
It very much did, because
Yeah.
to not be your most authentic self in your home, I mean, and then you can't do it at work and you can't do it. It made it so much more hidden and taboo. And I was trying to fight the idea of this being a bad thing. And at the same time, I'd been in that previous house for 12 years or whatever. And you know, all the neighbors and all that shit. We all know how that goes. And so I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I had kind of previously thought about it anyways, but this was the catalyst that said, this is what I'm going to do.
That's very common throughout our entire history of just packing up and moving and popping up in a new location as your new self rather than transitioning in front of everybody.
Yes. And however, I only moved 5 miles. So what is interesting about it, and even the realtor, I remember they're like, well, why don't you go to this part of town, or why don't you go to this part of town, or whatever. And I was like, the fact is, what had happened when I was going through my social transitioning, a lot of times, you know, I went to the grocery store, I'd go to the Walmart or whatever the case might be as my socially out self. And I had found a place where I felt safe, that I wasn't going to necessarily run into people that I knew professionally. I adjusted my time frames when I would go and do things like grocery shopping. Back in the day before COVID, of course, Walmart was open 24 hours. I'm somebody who gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning for work. Even on my days off, I could get up at 3, go hit Walmart, get the things I need there, bring them home. By the time I was done doing that, make a new cup of coffee, and then go to the local grocery store and get the things I need, and kind of be back into my safety by the time everybody else is getting up, that we're more or less normal. So I didn't go far because I felt like this is my community, but I did need to move out of the cul-de-sac that I was in and get away from that. This was something that came along nicely and provided me a lot of safety.
Yeah, I know from my personal experience that it made it a lot easier to go to a new location, even though it wasn't that far away. That's great.
It really was. And, you know, as I said, that was 2019, late in the year of 2019. And right around the corner, as we look back, we know COVID was there. What was interesting about that, we talk about the silver linings of COVID. That provided a really interesting silver lining for myself. Some of the family obligations that I had at the time that were sort of set in expectation of spending this time was allowed to be changed without having to have a lot of conversation about it. It allowed me to create new boundaries by default rather than sitting down and saying, I think we have somewhat of a codependent and unhealthy relationship between us. COVID offered that to me. The other thing it offered, even at my level in my career, I was sent home. And so I had 3 weeks where I sat at home and then eventually I called and said, I'm going to go crazy if I can't come to work. And so we made some adjustments for myself and a couple other employees. But what that did was it allowed me to really sit in this space in my authenticity and really nurture my authenticity and figure out at the time we didn't know what the hell was going on or what was going to happen or I mean it was a shit show, right?
Right.
It was crazy, but at the same time it provided me this level of sort of comfort because I mean we couldn't go anywhere. So I was here and I was able to be me. So it started on the ship. And then a year later, we had that time here in COVID. And then, of course, my team went back to work because we are essentials. But the fact is, I had to have a mask on my face from the time I went through our security. And then I'm required to wear safety glasses all the time. And between the two, I can say that I am probably one of the few women on the planet that would put makeup on before putting a mask on my face. But it allowed me to have the anonymity of wearing makeup and going to work and having that sense of expression. And it was really a big part of that transitioning professionally.
How was your coming out at work experience and how did you go about that?
As I said, my hair was beginning to grow out. And just to make it clear, I work on a team of 12 immediately in my group, all males. In my particular department, in a group of 335, there's about 9 females in the group. And I'm in blue collar work and they're in more administrative white collar kind of work. So it was very gradual. I mean, it was very, very slow. Hair was growing out. I would get my nails done. I would do like a French manicure with a matte coat rather than the shiny coat and a little bit shorter. And some comments were made periodically, but nobody really confronted. And, I just kind of let it be. I've always been kind of the lone wolf in work environments because I'm right now the only one in my group that is not married and has kids. And so that makes you a lone wolf. And that's how it's been very much in my career. And even greater, I mean, the entire company I work for is about 7,500 people. And bringing a kid to work day and family days and all this are huge events. And those are events that obviously I don't partake in. But what ended up happening was we finally got to the point where we were no longer required to wear a mask at work. And I mean, we were segregated from one another to a point where when we ate, we sat at this space. You would sit over there. So even though I was taking my mask off and had some makeup on my face, I felt still I had the anonymity that I needed to do that because there was so much distance between us.
So nobody really commented on your makeup? Nobody said anything about that, I guess, huh?
Every now and then there'd be a little jab here or there. I just kind of played it off, right? I never really answered. Like my nails would be commented on. I'd say, yeah, aren't they cool? And they'd be like, oh, well, whatever, or something like that. You know what I mean? I just played it off really subtly.
So they probably thought you were gay, right?
I believe that's what they were thinking. And again, with being the age that I was and single and no kids, that's kind of assumption that people like to make. I mean, how is it that you never got somebody pregnant all these years? And that you don't have a kid? I mean, these are the kind of questions that would be asked. And I'd say, well, I was really, really careful. That even has a slight place in my history as well. I knew way back when we talk about those puberty days that you mentioned, I knew way back then that I had something different in me later. And I knew that having a family would be incredibly difficult. And so I made sure that the people that I dated, that they were women that either had or never wanted kids and weren't coming into a relationship with me with the hopes of that. I remember coming out, I had this was in 2021. I had I had decided that I needed a therapist. At the time, I didn't know that I'd be fully coming out, but I thought I want to have this relationship with the therapist developed so that if later on I decide I want to come out or I want to fully transition, that I would have the foundation with the therapist. And so I started therapy in June of 21, I believe it was. I found this therapist through a person that I work with that has transitioned on the job, female to male, transmasculine. And they were a big part of my coming out story professionally because they were out and they were part of our LGBT support group and or employee resource group at work. So I joined that group, and at first I joined it only with my personal email address because fears of my ladder up being able to see my email, because of course they can, right? It's the workplace. And being suspicious of me being gay and then seeing something come from the ERG that proclaims that it's part of the LGBTQ community, I figured that my email would have been read. So I had it come through the house to my personal email first. But that particular level of connection at work allowed me to feel like, okay, one day I can do this. What happened was I started with therapy. About 90 days later, I started HRT. So it would have been August of 21. And I mean, it was two therapy sessions, and I was like, okay, this is what I need. I just need to do this. And so we did the legalities that need to be done with that. And then January of 22, I had a meeting with my boss, and it was a Monday, I remember, first Monday of the year. I would guess he probably remembers it too. But I said, hey, can I have a meeting with you at 8 a.m.? And he said, sure. Of course, the changes to come with HRT, I knew that was going to start becoming more and more visible, and I wanted to go ahead and get this out of the way now. So here's how I came out professionally. I said, I know you've seen me change. I want you to know you're going to see me change more. And the reason for that is that I identify as a woman and I'm transgender. So what I want to do is offer you an opportunity to ask me any question you want to ask me. And, I work in an environment with all men, and we know there's workplace conversation that is HR safe, so to speak. But, when I said you can ask me any question you want to ask me, I was opening it up for them to ask me anything. His response was, well, we kind of had a little bit of a thought about this, we've all talked about it when you're not here. So it's clear we talk about each other when they're not there, right? That happens.
Of course they did.
Of course. And
It's a guy thing too.
it is. I mean, and frankly, I never really fit in. I've never really fit in with the guy scene. I have a very masculine career and job, but I don't fit in with that social normal that is regular guys. The things that they enjoy doing, yes, women enjoy going to the shooting range and going hunting and all of this, but guys don't enjoy going to the nail salon and getting a pedicure, right? I mean, there are differences. And I don't want to portray that only these activities are for men, but the activities that the people that I work with are not something that interest me. And I always chuckle about this because they'll say, hey, you're going to watch the Super Bowl? And I'll be like, no, I'm going to go get a pedicure. And because, the salon's wide open on Super Bowl Sunday, I'll tell you that. So he asked a couple of questions. And the first question was, are you a batter or a catcher? Are you practicing gay sex? And if so, are you the dominant or the submissive? And then the second question was the person that had become a romantic interest for me at the time. We all know that at work, we talk about our spouses, our significant others. And they said, well, is that person really a guy? And I'm like, no, she was born a female and she's a female today. And so that's the story there. And then the other thing that I added when I did this conversation was I was like, I don't want you to assume things. I don't want you to go to social media and find a meme and assume that that's me, because that's not me. What I want you to do is I want you to come to me and ask me the really, really hard and embarrassing questions that you want to ask because you think you want to know that that's what I am. So this is how I want to present it. And he said, okay. Well, I had that conversation with the remaining 11 people that I work with over the course of the next week, one-on-one, face-to-face, about a 5 to 7 minute conversation. I did not do any group conversations. Prior to talking to my supervisor, I had contacted in October of 2021. I had contacted my HR department and let them know what was going down because some of my classifications that I have at work, I wanted to make sure that me being on HRT wasn't going to affect my safety status requirements at work, which I knew it wouldn't. But I wanted to put everything in HRT's hands so that they were aware of what was going down, and so that I did everything in a lateral way that is appropriate. So I ended up going through and answering the question, having the conversation with 11 remaining people. And I knew that once I did that, that the troops would go out and spread the word to the other, 360 people on my team and well on through, because I've been with this organization for, it'll be 18 years this year. And so I'm a well-known figure in my profession and at my work. And there's many other departments that I collaborate with in order to do my job. In the course of about a year, I ended up having that conversation 97 times. I've documented who I've talked to and their responses. And the number one question that I received from men, the number one question was, are you a batter or a catcher? The number one statement or pat on the back that they thought they were giving me was, man, you've got big balls. And I was like, I really wish I didn't, but thank you. And when a female would comment, they would say, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and willing to share this with me. That was kind of an interesting experience. Since then, I haven't had the conversation a whole lot. Once in a great while, somebody will come along that over the 18 years, I've worked in a couple different departments, and I'll come across XYZ and like, oh my God, I heard about this. Tell me. So then I'll tell them a little bit more. But quite frankly, I don't have that conversation anymore. I don't seek to have people understand why I did it. This is who I am today. So that's kind of how it came with my professional coming out. And I'll share a little bit about my coming out with my immediate family. It was important for me to come out professionally first. And my therapist would say, well, Marzzi, you don't know how they would have responded because you didn't give them the opportunity to respond yet. So I want to put that out there. But I pretty much knew that my immediate family, which, as you all know, I don't have brothers and sisters, so this would be my parents, right? They're going to say, well, what is your employer going to do? What are they going to do with you? Well, once I knew I was clear with the employer, I knew that then I didn't have to answer that question for the family, because that would have just been a fear-based response. And then I would have been like, I don't know what they'll do. Well, then one family member in particular would say, well, you better figure that out before you go any further.
They didn't want you living on their couch, right?
Right.
There's that fear
Exactly.
there that, oh my God, going to lose a job.
Well, yeah. And of course, when we're doing these things, we're talking to people, in the documentary Disclosure that came out in 2020, one of the interviewees is sharing to us that in 2020, GLAAD did a survey. And at that time, less than 20% of the United States that they surveyed knew somebody who even was transgender or identified as or had heard of transgender. So I knew going into this would be difficult. So much to my family's despair, they were the last ones to find out. I had created a community that was safe. I had some cousins that were safe, but really what it was people like you, the people that were in my chosen family. And then I had to create a space where I was safe at home and going to the store and all of that. And so if we were to sort of look at this transition on a linear way, it was in the home first, out then socially, out socially more, and then professionally, and then to the family. And so that experience happened also right around the same time that I came out professionally and I became clear that this was going to be a safe environment. So my transition was very difficult for my mom and my stepdad, incredibly difficult. I originally came out to them in 21 when I started therapy in HRT, and that has only resolved within the last 5 months of being able to start developing more friendship and togetherness. In particular, for my mom to hear this at 72 and have only one child, and to be the last link, if you will, in the chain to find out was very, very difficult for them. However,
Yep.
I felt like it was the way I had to do it.
The way you handled coming out at work, telling your coworkers individually in person was great because you controlled the story that they were going to spread.
Thank you
And
very
that
much.
that was huge. I really think you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
And with parents and immediate family, they're the most difficult to come out to for any of us. And they have no framework for it whatsoever. They've lived a heteronormative life, and you're obviously breaking that norm. And it will take time. It does take time.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Touching on the professional part of it, HR was like, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this first of next year. Okay,
Mhm.
well, do you want us to be there with you? I said, no. My HR rep she's a lovely, lovely, lovely person. And she's like, I'll be there with you. I won't say anything. I said, nope. She's like, do you want us to send out an email? Do you want us to do a training session? I was like, no, I don't want any of that shit. I said, I'm going to do it by myself. I'm going to
Good.
fly solo. I said, I got you right here in my back pocket. And, if I need you, I'll call you.
I
I
really respect that. I really do.
thank you. I know the people that I work with. I've been with them a long time. And I know that if I had done anything other than the bravest thing, because we transgender people are incredibly brave, in my opinion, it would have devalued the experience.
Mhm.
And so when they said, you got some big balls, I know that although we chuckled about that, when they were all collaborating about it over here, they knew that inside them that they would not probably be able to do what I did.
Right.
And I'm also known as someone who practices 19 years of addiction recovery. And they know that because we all know each other's lives to a fairly deep degree. But they know that I've changed my life in positive ways in multiple different
Mhm.
facets. And so, although I don't fit in with them and I'm not one of them, I also know that there's parts of my journey that they would want nothing to do with. Not because they're not women, but because of the aspect of needing to come out and doing it the way I did, straight face on.
Sounds like
They
they,
really develop some respect for you from that.
I believe so. I think they have very little respect for me as a person because I'm not a woman and I'm not a man, oftentimes in their eyes, I believe. But I also believe that the way that I let them know who I am, they have to respect that. That's kind of how I see it. Now maybe I'm wrong. I have a little bit of inferiority complex inside of me. I'll be honest. But today, what they think of me is none of my business. I'm
Mhm.
me. I
I think
identify
people
as a
don't really,
woman. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, people don't understand what it takes. And, what you talked about, bravery, courage, I hear those words so much from people who have been through this, that it does take that. Some say it's not courage, some say it's survival.
Survival that drives you to come out.
But, someone I know said to me a while ago, she said, why would anybody want to give up their male privilege and become a woman when, all the things we know that happen to women? Why would anybody want to do that? And I said, you just answered your own question, that it's not a matter of wanting to do that or making the decision or making the choice that, oh, I think today I'm going to be a woman. It's who you are. And that's what I'm
Mhm.
hearing from you too. This is who you were, who you've always been. And you're now being authentic about that. And what you said their opinion doesn't matter. It's none of your business. That's such a healthy way to look at it.
Thank you. I have to look at it that way.
Mhm.
And there's certain professions out there, all the military, first responders, high rise, steel workers, people that work on high voltage power lines and towers. Some of the people I work with, I mean, these are very dangerous jobs and careers, and they're brave people that do that. But I feel that also in the realm of courageous people is transgender people. And when I work with other people that are transgender and they're going through issues of people calling them he, him, or she, her, or whatever, I'm like, we got to just plow through that bullshit because we have to have a thick skin to be who we are in many ways.
So
And
what was your feeling when you finally, on this cruise, you made that decision, you started living authentically, you came out at work? What was your feeling at that point? You've been suppressing this for 50 years.
it was like the greatest feeling. When I was on the ship and I made that decision, although there was a tremendous amount of unknowns in front of me and
Mhm.
scary unknowns, once I made that decision, and I can tell you, I can go back and I can probably tell you that happened between 10:30 and 11:30 in the morning on my birthday in 2018, November. Once that decision was made, it was such a relief of, well, let's talk about shame. This is what we get, and self-shame is so debilitating in so many ways. And but once I knew that that's what I was going to do, and I had taken on the idea that I don't know how, but I'm going to do this as far as I can go. I did mention earlier I didn't know if I was going to be able to get the surgery. I didn't know how far it would go, but I knew I was changing my identity to me and to you, the world. And speaking of identity, today, I refer to myself as a woman. Clinically, or in a situation like this, yes, I'm transgender because I was born a boy, but really, I identify as a woman. My the transness part of it is done. So I don't really see myself as transgender any longer, other than when we're speaking technically.
I would
And
totally agree with that.
thank you. I do believe that shame played a big role in the relationship with my parents because, whether it be their religious backgrounds, their familial backgrounds with their other brothers and sisters and all of that, I was an embarrassment to them and they were embarrassed. So on my dad's side of the family, that's where I have the cousins that were supportive. And quite frankly, my relationship with my dad has been very fractured since about 11, 12 years old. And we went through a lot of verbal abuse as a young person. He's a person that at the time had addiction issues of his own. And so as we got older, that did change. But our relationship hasn't changed. It's really pretty much today at my current age, exactly as it was when I was 11 or 12. And I pretty much believe that as soon as puberty hit, that's when our relationship became incredibly fractured. And that affects us today. But that's how it is. My coming out to him was a thing of that, in his belief that I'll be going to hell. And that's where I'll get to reside when I'm dead. And when I was told that, I said, well, Dad, I appreciate you telling me how you really feel, and I won't be alone. And I know that he's ashamed of me, and he still refers to me as my previous name and as a he, him. And that's how he is. Now, how do I handle that? Well, that's how he's going to be. He's not going to change. But how I handle that is a phrase that I learned a short time ago, a couple years ago. It was made clear to me that our parents, those of us that have them, that are still living, we have a commodity that they want. And it's not our money, it's not our house or our car, it's our time. And we're all professional people. Everybody has jobs, kids, all that stuff. Time is incredibly valuable. And who I spend my time with is who I care about. I care about you too, and this audience that will see this. And so that's where I spend my time. And so my time with my dad is pretty limited.
But you said something earlier too that we choose our own family after we transition.
Exactly. And that's the
And
people I
I've
spend my
had
time with.
several of my gay friends tell me that exact same thing. And I was told that early in my transition as well.
How I saw this play a role in the relationship with my mom. Last September, she had gone to see her brother. And so that's in 24. I came out to her in 21, and they didn't know. She has one brother and he has a large family. But, I laugh and portray the idea of my parents. When I say my parents, I'm talking my mom and stepdad. My dad and his wife are a separate relationship. But
Mhm.
of my parents traveling and something happening to them and me being at a funeral or at a service and my family on her side coming and being like, who's the blonde bitch in the black dress? We don't even know who it is because they had no clue. And my mom and I decided that it was for her to tell her brother, not for me to tell her brother. And this way she had all the control in that revelation and exposure. Well, in September, she was back visiting them, and they were talking about how is it that transgender issues are a topic of politics for a presidential election. And my aunt and uncle were like, this is really hard to understand. And that opened the window for my mom to say, well, look, I need to talk to you about Marzzi. And so she let the story be told and shared with them what has taken place. And my aunt and uncle were like, all we want is for her to be happy. And they pretty much immediately started using the proper pronouns and name. And so when we talk about shame and how powerful and paralyzing it is, and then to find out that there was no shame from that side of the family, um,
Mhm.
and a lot of self-growth on her part, that relationship that we have today is very much like it was 10 years ago, with some of the codependent and unhealthy practices been aligned. But yeah, I often like to share about shame and the role that it plays in our own psyche as a trans person and what society does to us. And then what it does professionally, like, my boss, as I said, I work for a company of 7,500 people, and, he has to go to ladder up staff meetings and so forth and so on. And there was quite a bit of spotlight that was put on my coming out in my realm because the other coming outs that have happened on the white collar side. And I did it on the blue collar side in a trade that has a lot of bravado and masculinity in it. And so I'm sure there was a little bit of like, for my boss, like, of course it would be me, But at the same time, I feel like we can switch that and let that be, let me shine and I'll make you shine. And then you can be like, see, look, this is how well it works.
Right. So you're a prime example of exactly how well you can work your profession, still do your job, and be you. That's huge. That
Thank you
is
so
really
much.
huge.
I had a meeting about a year and a half ago with some people in executive HR level. I was invited as a guest and I showed a picture, I put on a overhead a picture of myself when they hired me and a picture of myself today. And I said, okay, so this is the person that you hired. And this person has all the skill that I have today and the heart and the drive. And this person has a commercial driver's license and all these classifications and this and this and this. And I said, you hired this person knowing that they were going to be right for the organization. But I said, if she came to you, would you hire her for the same job? I
Mhm.
just want you to think about it. And there was pause. I gave them time to digest. And I said, because she is me and she has all those classifications and qualities that he has. And I said, so this is something we need to think about when we feel like, oh, well, a woman can't do this job or because this person transitions on the job, they can't do this job. And it can happen a lot on the white collar side too, in administrative assistant work and analytical work. A lot of times that's highly populated by female persons. And my person that I spoke of that transitioned from female to male, they experienced a little bit of backflash from the women in their organization, but it's important to remember that if we're equipped to do the job, then we're equipped. I know that my genitals had nothing to do with the work that I do then or today. Am I as strong as I was then today? I am not. But when they hired me, I was 18 years younger as well. So
Mhm.
as a male, I'm probably not as strong as I was 18 years ago either. And so, anyways, it was really a special, special opportunity to share a perspective that this person can have the same qualities as he does, because I'm a living example of that.
That was brilliant that you put that out there. What an object lesson for them.
I
I
did
hope
it
people open minds.
inside. I had a lot of, I had a little bit of fear
Of course.
going in and doing that.
Of
And I had a
course.
lot of yes.
Hmm.
But I handled
Celebrate.
it incredibly. I did it as professionally and humbly as I possibly could, so that it was consumed almost like cheese and crackers at a wine party, so that they were consuming it. I shouldn't eat these crackers, but I'm gonna anyways, and it not become so that they could turn my attitude or my presentation to a way of not hearing the message.
Have you seen any change within the organization that's visible anyway, as a result of what you've done?
Well, I'm fortunate. The organization that I work for, our current drive is that we hire you for your talent, come as you are. And that's a desire that the upper level management wants to have when it comes to recruitment.
Good.
Let me switch gears for a minute here. One of the things that you and I talked about before was, and you brought this up a little bit, is the use of the word dead name or dead that you definitely have an aversion to those types of terms. So talk about that a little bit. What's your take on that subject?
Thank you very much for asking. I remember back in that 2012, 2014 kind of frame when I would find something to talk about it or to learn or read, I started noticing how this phrase is used. My previous name for my personal protection, I'm just going to tell you, was Tom. And, I always wondered why they used the dead name. Today, I totally understand why they used that terminology. But for me, Tom was the person that went through all of the shit to get to the place where Marzzi gets to be out and be free. And so people are like, what kind of shit are you talking about? Well, I didn't fit in. I mean, really, even when I was young, when it came to junior high gym class and all the sports classes and all the extracurriculars that we do, what I did was I ran track. I was in gymnastics, pole vault, a shot put, that kind of stuff. I ran the mile. I did stuff that I could do by myself. I was very much of a lone wolf in a lot of ways. Why? Because I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in with that energetic connection that was with the guys. And that carried on. So you leave there and you go to school after high school, you go to college. And of course, that's a much more, unless you're in the sports, a much more independent kind of role. But then you start working, you get in various different career fields. And, I was never one that would get together with the gang after work and go out and do this and go camping and go do certain things. So I don't want it to sound poor, pitiful me, because it's definitely not that. But I found a way of traveling through my journey of life very, very solitary. Oftentimes I have one or two friends that were safe, and then I had somebody that I dated, usually that was safe. I used to be a long distance cyclist, and I would ride from where I'm at 100, 150 miles, or oftentimes go out and ride 30 or 60 miles. And I tried getting together with the local different groups of cyclists. And I just found I was much happier solitary. Later on, I ended up having a Goldwing motorcycle, a big cruiser. And you can get together with these groups or those groups or that groups. And all of my friends that rode bikes rode Harleys, which, is a fabulous motorcycle. It wasn't what I wanted. I wanted a Goldwing. And, at the time I was often told you're not a man, you're a pussy because you bought a Goldwing. And, so I just found that for me, as myself as Tom, he, him, that as they went through all these life experiences that although I navigated it very positively, it was very painful at times. And being solitary all the time hurts a great deal. So when I transitioned and Marzzi Starzzi sort of bloomed and she came out of her shell, she has a great deal of love for that little boy and for that person that went through all of that to make it okay for her. And so ultimately what ended up happening was Tom didn't say, "All right, Marzzi, you're free to go now." What Marzzi did was said, "Tom, you know what? I've got you right here, and I'm going to protect you and take care of you. I got it now. We did it together, but you don't need to worry about all that bullshit today." And so I am part of my past. I am my past person, and my past person is me. And so today, I honor him. And as I travel my journey of authenticity today, there's no part of that person that is dead to me. We came together and we are going to be together. And I'll touch on that briefly. Dating is an experience as a trans person that is quite precarious at times, especially pre-surgery, right? And social life in general is quite interesting. What I found socially, the person that I was very introverted, had very little social life, had very little outgoings, and when I did have things, I did them all by myself. The cycling, the motorcycle groups, all of that stuff. I did everything by myself. I like to DJ and host karaoke. That's a solo gig. Yeah, you're the spotlight, but you're still flying solo. It's not like being in a band where, you have all these personalities that melt together. So for me today, the he, him of my past is a part of today. And I've recently started dating somebody. We've been friends for about 6 months, and probably about 3 months ago, we kind of became more of a couple. And her phrase is that she feels that she got a 2-for-1 special because she gets a little bit of the past me and all of the current me today. And that idea of me saying that person's dead, that name is dead, that all of that, I feel like by deading my past, that I'm deading a part of my current self as Marzzi today. And I don't want to do that because today I'm living a life that I never expected to have. And socially, I'm very, very active. I have a wonderful friend group. And so that person that I was before is the person that I am today. I just have a different name, different look.
So I was going to ask you what surprises you most about your life. I don't know if you just answered that or if there's something else that surprises you the most about your life.
I would say that as humbly and as unarrogantly I can say this, the thing that surprises me the most, I think, of my life today is when I look back and I think about my coming out period. When I look back at it, I'm like, wow, that was really, really, really hard. To second that, I would go with Lynn. What I kind of just said is today, I have a level of happiness today that is far from where I was a long time ago. I do know that in my life, I still have bills to pay and I still have work to go to every day. And, I still have friendships and relationships that need to be nurtured and cultivated. But I'm valued by other people, and I get to value other people authentically today. And that's probably one of my greatest assets today.
I love
I
that.
can
Thank you. That's beautiful. And Wendy and I have put this project together to educate people, especially cisgender people who are open-minded, but they don't really understand what's going on. You- They've never been in that situation of being someone who's born transgender. So what can you share with the people we're trying to educate that you want them to understand about what it's like to be born transgender?
Well, the idea that I was born transgender is absolutely a fact. I knew way, way back, although the language wasn't there for me at the time, I knew I was different. And if I was born and I had some sort of a birth defect and I needed to be in some sort of a device that would help me mobility wise, there would be empathy for that. And there would be love and care and concern for my parents and my family. What I would like for those of you who don't know persons like me and Wendy, or you've just become acquainted with and you don't understand, is that this isn't a decision. It was a decision for me to come out, yeah, and to live happy. But don't we all have a right to live happy? Yes. Secondly, if it's understood that I did this for attention, yes, I'm sitting here sharing my story, and we can call that getting attention. But if you think that the attention that I get out there and that's being given to my community is the kind of attention that I want, then I question what it is that you see as positive attention. I'm here to educate, to show you that I'm a normal person. I have heartbreak, I have happiness. I live my life exactly like everybody else. I just happen to have had a journey that was set in motion way back when I was born. And my goal is that we can broaden our story here and to help people understand that we're just another group of humans. We're no different than everybody else on the planet.
That's great. Thank you. And one more question. I know we could go on for hours listening to your story, talking to you. One question I want to ask that I ask everybody is, what's your driving force?
I would say that by default, I've been afforded some privileges. We go back to what was said previously, Lynn, you brought up. One day I was at a seminar. I had gotten through speaking on this topic, and the person asked me, I was a person of color, had asked me, how is it that you would give up your man card to be a woman? And as I explained to them, if my man card is something that I'm going to flash and say, oh, by the way, it's my man card, I get this privilege. There are some privileges that were afforded to me by being who I was prior to today. And so, with that in mind, my goal is that I offer to those who haven't had the same privileges that I have in career choice, in selection of where I've come up in my career, in my path of recovery from addiction, all of those things that perhaps appear that they came easy to me, my transition, my coming out professionally, all of that stuff. What I drive to do is to help others find the best path for them and for them to know that I'm there to guide them and to help them. I was helping somebody probably 6-ish months ago that I didn't feel like I was able to offer them the guidance they needed. So I connected them with Wendy. And as I understand, that relationship has been very positive and helpful. So my driving force is whether it be in the trans community, if it be looking at shame reduction and working on self-esteem building, and or if it's guiding through transition or coming out or being identifying that I'm gay or I'm pansexual or I'm lesbian. All of these things are the things that I'm going to utilize my quote unquote privileges to give back to my fellow brothers and sisters so that they can roll.
Thank you for that. And thank you for who you are and what you do.
Thank you. This is a little bit on a lighter note, but I want to talk a little bit about dating. From 2017 to 2021, I had chosen to fly solo. And so that was quite a long time. And it becomes a lonely world out there when you're in this kind of a phase. I remember it was April of 21. I had posted myself on one of the dating websites, and I had gone ahead and stated in that post that I was a person transitioning. And that resulted in a relationship that lasted for a while and then it ended. And today, if I'm in a place where I'm going to have myself on a dating website, I prefer to just say who I am and not discuss that I'm transgender at the time. So oftentimes there's this story of disclosure and how do we practice this? I find that, there's this idea that because you're trans, that you must disclose who you are, and then the other person is going to have feelings about that. And so the way I handled it often was, hey, let's meet for coffee after you've connected a few times on the phone and via text and all that. And that's kind of the way that has happened for me. I will say that for those that are like myself and you're going to go into the dating realm, I think it's really important to get that information out early on. It doesn't have to be in your profile like it was for me in the beginning. But I had times where I would meet with somebody and we'd have coffee and they would tell me for 45 minutes what their story was. And then I'd have the opportunity to start telling my story. And we identify with our careers often. So I would share with what my career was, which oftentimes is intriguing because a lot of my work is done by males. And here I am as a female sharing what I do. And they're like intrigued. And the way I always handle it was I have this very unique perspective on life, and they'd say, "Oh, really? Well, tell me." Now they're like double intrigued. And then I say, well, I spent about the first 45 years of my life living as a male, and I was born a male. And today, clearly, I'm not. And the experience of doing that, although the responses were varied, anywhere from okay, thank you, and getting up and walking away and leaving, to thank you for sharing this with me and being very filled with gratitude and such. I think that dating, for those of us that are in transition, whether female to male or male to female, is something that we need to have a space to talk about it. Because oftentimes what happens is, like for me, here I'm putting on the dating website that I want to date lesbians. So then, of course, you're going to attract lesbians that want to date a lesbian, right? And I do identify as that. But when you're a person who owns a penis still and you're dating lesbians, my assumption at least was that a lesbian doesn't want somebody that has a penis, right? So we had to approach that very openly with a little bit of humor like we had here. But what it did for those that are listening is it opened up the vast many of identities that there really are. And, the person that I've begun this new relationship with, she's like, well, I don't know that I identify as a lesbian. So I said, well, I can't tell you what you identify as, but I gave her a list of all these different identities. And oftentimes something like bisexual or pansexual or, whatever. The idea of I don't want to label. And a lot of these things can fall in. As I travel my journey and walk through what is called life with other people, and they have these questions, I like to ponder the thought of, I said to a friend a while back, I said, if you were out, this person dates only women, but she's not out to her family. I said, how would that change the connection you have with myself or another woman? Well, it wouldn't. I said, okay, so if you're digging on this person and you have this relationship, well, what about the family? What about Christmas? What about all this other stuff? Those things are small, and I mean they're important. They're important times of year. But when I was married and living a straight life, my partner usually went to her families for Christmas, and I went to my families because we didn't have enough time to be with everybody at the same time. So I think it's really important to have more of an open mind than a closed mind. And this is coming from me, that I clearly had the closed mind at one point in time. And what I found out was that a lot of times people aren't as hung up on genitalia as perhaps I was when I went into the dating pool. So I just like to share the positivity of that and offer the idea that there's many different identities for people that are not transgender to identify with, that may find themselves one day partnering with and falling in love with a person that used to be a different gender than what they are today. And there's no shame. Just be you and be authentic.
Be open to that. I think we get in trouble so much trying to put a label on things, and that's where we get in trouble with the transgender. It's people are saying, people, we know who we're talking about, people there. People are saying they're either male or female, and trying to put labels on those and have those labels be gospel, that's it, that's all there is. And if we can get rid of some of those labels, and that's what I'm hearing you talking about, what am I? Do I have to identify as this or that or the other? If we just let it be, it seems like it would be so much easier than having to put people in boxes.
What I was told from my very beginning was when I brought up sexual orientation, because I truly didn't know what I was. I've been repressing everything, including my own personality. And gender identity and sexual orientation were repressed. And what I was told by my therapist, there's a lid for every pot.
Well, and your therapist told you you would know
when I found it.
When you found it. So, thanks, Marzzi, for sharing that. We're going to wind up pretty soon. This has been wonderful. Wendy, what do you have to ask? Anything before we end this? Ask or say?
I can totally relate to everything you've said. I came through the similar stages and everything differently, like we all do. We all take our own path through this, but there's so many commonalities and so many parallels. Male privilege. Well, it's a privilege for some, for others, it's not. I agree with your comment too. I'm always grateful to my male facsimile for having gotten me to here. Thank you for today, and thank you for doing this with us.
So
thank you.
Any last words today? We're going to wrap it up, but like I said, we've got more to talk about. Any final words?
For those of you who are here learning about us, for those of you that are cisgendered and are questioning us, and those of you who are on your own self-discovery journey, allow yourself just to live authentically. For those of you who are questioning us, thank you for watching this video, and thank you for being a part of demystifying the transgender journey. And know that, we're just like everybody else. We get a mortgage to buy a house. We have to go to work Monday through Friday, all the same stuff. We're just like everybody else.
Thank you. You're amazing. And thank you for being here today, Marzzi.
Thank you,
Marzzi.
To our audience for being here today. This is a fabulous episode. I'm just so excited. This was such an amazing conversation today. So for our audience, thank you for being here. Be sure to subscribe and share and like and build this channel up. Come back for more conversations, because we have such amazing guests coming forward who are talking about these things that we need to educate ourselves about and educate myself about. So thank you for that. My co-host, Wendy Cole, is just an amazing person. And people have said that they find that this is unusual, that a transgender woman and a cisgender woman are sharing and collaborating on a podcast and on a book like this. And it's just been remarkable. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Lynn Murphy, your host. This has been Wendy Cole, co-host. And if you want to get in touch with Marzzi, contact us through our information, which will be in the show notes. The Transgender Journey, contact us and we'll put you in touch with Marzzi. So thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody. Tune in next time for our next episode on Demystifying the Transgender Journey.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of our fascinating interviews. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. So until next time, stay curious and stay kind.